The manila folder felt heavier than it should have in Maria Santos's trembling hands as she sat cross-legged on the dusty attic floor of her childhood home. It was 3 days after her mother's funeral, and the task of sorting through decades of accumulated memories had fallen to her as the oldest child. At 36, Maria had already lived through more responsibility than most people twice her age, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to discover in that innocuous folder marked "Important Documents" in her mother's careful handwriting. If you enjoy stories like this, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new stories. It really helps us out, and don't forget to leave your comment about the story. Now let's continue. The afternoon sun streamed through the small attic window, casting long shadows across boxes of Christmas decorations, old photo albums, and forgotten furniture. Maria had been dreading this moment for weeks, knowing that going through her mother Carmen's belongings would be emotionally devastating. Carmen Santos had been the anchor of their small family, the woman who had held everything together through countless storms and challenges. Her death at 61 from complications related to diabetes had left a void that Maria wasn't sure could ever be filled. Maria wiped the sweat from her forehead and opened the folder, expecting to find insurance papers, property deeds, and other mundane but necessary documents. Instead, her eyes fell upon something that made her blood run cold. A birth certificate. Not just any birth certificate, but one that would shatter the foundation of everything she believed about her life and her family. The name on the certificate was David Miguel Santos, the young man she had raised as her son for the past 18 years. But as Maria's eyes moved down the document, scanning the familiar information with growing confusion, she reached the section that listed the parents. Under Mother, she expected to see her own name, Maria Elena Santos. Instead, she saw her mother's name, Carmen Isabella Santos. And under Father, a name she had heard whispered in hushed tones throughout her childhood but never fully understood, Roberto Luis Santos, her own father. Maria's hands began to shake uncontrollably as the implications of what she was seeing began to sink in. The birth certificate was dated 18 years ago, which matched David's age exactly. But according to this official document, David wasn't her son at all. He was her brother, her full biological brother, born to the same parents who had raised her. The folder slipped from her numb fingers, scattering additional documents across the attic floor. Among them were medical records, hospital discharge papers from the day David was born, and what appeared to be legal documents that Maria's vision was too blurred by tears to read clearly. She felt as though the floor beneath her was giving way, as though everything solid and real in her world was dissolving into chaos and confusion. For several minutes, Maria simply sat in stunned silence, staring at the damning evidence spread before her. Her mind raced backward through 18 years of memories, searching for clues she might have missed, signs that should have told her the truth about David's parentage. But all she could remember were the lies, the carefully constructed story her mother had told her when she was 18 years old and David was just a newborn. Carmen had sat her down in their small kitchen and explained with tears in her eyes that Maria had made a mistake with a boy from school. She said that Maria had been so traumatized by the experience and the subsequent pregnancy that she had blocked it from her memory completely. Carmen explained that the doctors called it dissociative amnesia, a psychological response to extreme trauma. She said that Maria had carried David to term, but had been in such a fragile mental state that she couldn't remember any of it. At 18, Maria had been confused and frightened by her mother's revelation, but she had no reason to doubt it. There were gaps in her memory from that time period. She had been dealing with depression and anxiety, and the idea that she might have suppressed traumatic memories didn't seem impossible. When Carmen placed the tiny baby in her arms and explained that she would help Maria raise him, it had felt like the right thing to do. Maria had looked into David's dark eyes and felt an overwhelming surge of protective love that she assumed was maternal instinct. Now, sitting in that dusty attic with the truth laid bare before her, Maria realized that the love she had felt was real. But it wasn't the love of a mother for her child. It was the love of a big sister for her baby brother, a bond that had been twisted and redefined by lies and manipulation. The sound of the front door opening and closing downstairs jolted Maria back to the present moment. David was home from his job at the local grocery store where he worked part-time while finishing his senior year of high school. In just a few months, he would graduate and had been making plans to attend community college in the fall. Maria had been so proud of him, so excited about his future and the young man he was becoming. She had spent countless nights helping him with homework, attending parent-teacher conferences, cheering him on at soccer games, and worrying about typical teenage problems like peer pressure and college applications. "Mom, you up there?" David's voice called from the bottom of the attic stairs, using the title that now felt like a knife twisting in Maria's chest. "Yeah, I'm here," Maria managed to call back, though her voice sounded hollow and strange to her own ears. Just sorting through some things. Need any help? I finished my shift early today." Maria looked down at the documents scattered around her and felt a wave of nausea wash over her. How could she face David knowing what she now knew? How could she look into his eyes and pretend that everything was normal when their entire relationship had been built on a foundation of lies? "No, that's okay," she replied, hastily gathering the papers and stuffing them back into the folder. "I'll be down in a few minutes." But Maria didn't come down for nearly an hour. Instead, she sat in that attic and forced herself to read every single document in the folder, piecing together the true story of David's birth and the elaborate deception that had followed. The medical records showed that Carmen had indeed given birth to David at the age of 43, a late-in-life pregnancy that she had somehow managed to hide from Maria and everyone else in their community. There were documents showing that Carmen had taken a leave of absence from her job at the post office, claiming she needed to help care for Maria during a difficult time. There were receipts for baby supplies purchased months before David's supposed arrival in their lives. There was even correspondence with a social worker discussing the challenges of raising a child later in life and Carmen's concerns about how to tell her older daughter about the new baby. Most damning of all was a letter that Carmen had apparently written to herself, a sort of journal entry dated just 2 weeks after David's birth. In her mother's familiar handwriting, Maria read, "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I can't see any other way. Roberto left us when I told him about the pregnancy, and I can't raise this baby alone at my age. Maria is so young, but she's always been responsible and loving. If I tell her that David is her son, she'll step up and help me raise him. She'll never question it because she trusts me completely. Maybe someday I'll find the courage to tell them both the truth, but for now, this seems like the only solution. God forgive me for what I'm about to do to my children." Maria read that passage 3 times before the full weight of her mother's betrayal truly hit her. Carmen hadn't made this decision in a moment of panic or desperation. She had calculated the deception, planned it out, and executed it with cold precision. She had stolen 18 years of Maria's life, forcing her to take on the responsibilities of motherhood when she should have been discovering herself, dating, going to college, building her own life and dreams. The tears that had been threatening since the moment Maria found the birth certificate finally came in a torrent of grief and rage. She sobbed for the childhood David had been denied, growing up believing his sister was his mother and his actual mother was his grandmother. She cried for her own lost youth, for the relationships she had never pursued because she was too busy being a single mother, for the career aspirations she had abandoned to focus on raising David. But perhaps most heartbreaking of all, she wept for the genuine love that had grown between her and David over the years. A love that was real and deep and meaningful, but that had been forever tainted by the lies that surrounded it. How could she continue to be the most important person in his life when their entire relationship was built on deception? How could she tell him the truth without destroying the security and sense of identity he had built over 18 years? When Maria finally descended from the attic, her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she knew that David would notice something was wrong. She found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch, watching television and eating a sandwich, looking so young and carefree that her heart ached with the knowledge of what she was going to have to tell him. "Hey, you okay?" David asked, glancing up from the TV with concern evident in his dark eyes, eyes that Maria now realized looked exactly like her father's. "You look like you've been crying." Maria sat down heavily in the armchair across from him, the folder clutched tightly in her lap. For a moment, she considered lying, making up some story about being overwhelmed by grief over Carmen's death. It would be so much easier to pretend she had never found those documents, to let David continue believing that she was his mother and that their family structure, while unconventional, was at least honest. But as she looked at his concerned, trusting face, Maria knew that she couldn't perpetuate her mother's deception any longer. David deserved to know the truth about who he was, regardless of how painful that truth might be. And Maria deserved to finally understand her own life and the sacrifices she had made without even knowing she was making them. "David," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something. Something important about us, about our family." David muted the television and turned to face her fully, his expression growing more serious as he registered the gravity in her tone. "What is it, Mom? You're scaring me." The word Mom felt like a physical blow to Maria's chest, but she forced herself to continue. "I found some documents today while I was going through Grandma Carmen's things in the attic. Documents that change everything I thought I knew about our family." She opened the folder with shaking hands and pulled out David's birth certificate, holding it toward him. "I need you to look at this and tell me what you see." David took the document, his brow furrowed in confusion. Maria watched his face carefully as his eyes moved across the paper, seeing the exact moment when he reached the section listing his parents. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something approaching horror. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely audible. "This says that Grandma Carmen is my mother, and that Roberto, your dad, is my father, but that would mean you're my brother," Maria finished for him, the words feeling surreal as she spoke them aloud for the first time. "Not my son, my baby brother." David stared at the birth certificate for a long moment, then looked up at Maria with eyes full of confusion and pain. "But that's impossible. I remember being little, and you were always my mom. Grandma Carmen was always my grandma. How could this be real?" Maria pulled out the rest of the documents and spread them on the coffee table between them. "There's more. Medical records, hospital paperwork, even a letter that Carmen wrote explaining what she did and why she did it." As David examined each piece of evidence, Maria watched 18 years of his identity crumble before her eyes. The young man she had raised, protected and loved with every fiber of her being, was discovering that his entire sense of self had been constructed on lies. She could see him struggling to process not just the shocking revelation about their relationship, but all the implications that came with it. "So, when I was born," David said slowly, working through the timeline, "you were just 18 years old. You were still in high school." "I had just graduated," Maria confirmed, I was planning to go to community college, maybe study nursing. Instead, I got a job at the diner and focused on taking care of you." "But you were just a kid yourself," David said, his voice breaking slightly. "You gave up everything to raise me, thinking I was your son, when I was actually your brother. Carmen, made you sacrifice your entire life for a lie." The anguish in David's voice was almost unbearable for Maria to hear. She moved from her chair to sit beside him on the couch, instinctively reaching out to comfort him, the way she had done countless times throughout his childhood. But now, with the truth hanging between them, even that simple gesture felt complicated and strange. "David, I need you to understand something," Maria said, taking his hands in hers. "Everything I did for you, all the love I gave you, all the time and energy I invested in raising you, none of that was a lie. Yes, I thought you were my son, but the love was real, the care was real, the bond between us is real, even if it's different from what we thought it was." David looked at her with tears in his eyes. "But don't you see how messed up this is? I've been calling you Mom my whole life. I've thought of you as the person who gave birth to me, who brought me into the world, and now I find out that the person I thought was my grandma was actually my mother, and she's dead, so I can never even talk to her about it or ask her why she did this to us." The full weight of Carmen's betrayal became even clearer as David articulated the impossible position she had put them both in. By keeping her secret until her death, Carmen had ensured that she would never have to face the consequences of her deception. She had left Maria and David to sort through the wreckage of their shattered identities, without any possibility of getting answers or closure from the person who had created this mess. "I'm so angry at her," David continued, his voice growing stronger as emotion fueled his words. "I'm angry that she lied to us, that she stole your teenage years and my real childhood. I'm angry that she made me grow up thinking my sister was my mother and that she died before I could confront her about it." Maria felt a surge of protective instinct toward David that was as strong as it had ever been, regardless of whether he was her son or her brother. "You have every right to be angry. We both do. What she did was selfish and cruel, and it's affected every aspect of our lives for 18 years. They sat in silence for several minutes, both of them trying to process the magnitude of what they had learned and what it meant for their future. The house felt different now, as though the walls themselves were keeping secrets. Every family photo on the mantel told a different story than Maria had believed. Every memory was now filtered through the lens of this devastating revelation. "What do we do now?" David asked finally. "How do we move forward from this? Do we tell people the truth? Do we keep pretending to be mother and son?" I don't even know how to think about our relationship anymore. It was a question that Maria had been dreading because she honestly didn't have an answer. The practicalities of their situation were incredibly complex. David was just months away from turning 19, so the legal aspects of guardianship were less relevant than they might have been if he were younger. But there were still issues of identity, medical history, family relationships, and social perception to consider. "I think we need to take this one day at a time," Maria said carefully. "This is a lot to process, and we don't have to figure everything out immediately. The most important thing is that we're honest with each other from now on, and that we support each other through this transition." "But what about college?" David asked, his practical nature asserting itself even in the midst of emotional crisis. "I put you down as my mother on all my applications. My financial aid forms, my emergency contacts, everything assumes that you're my parent, not my sister." Maria realized that David was right. The bureaucratic implications of their situation were going to be incredibly complicated to untangle. For 18 years, she had been his legal guardian, making medical decisions, signing school forms, claiming him as a dependent on her taxes. Legally and practically, she had been functioning as his parent in every way that mattered. "We'll figure it out," she assured him, though she wasn't sure how. "Maybe we can talk to a lawyer or a counselor who has experience with situations like this. We can't be the first people this has ever happened to." David laughed bitterly. "I doubt there are many people who've been in exactly this situation. Most family secrets don't involve convincing an 18-year-old girl that her newborn brother is actually her son." The conversation continued for several hours as Maria and David worked through their shock, anger, and confusion together. They talked about specific memories from David's childhood, recontextualizing them through the lens of their new understanding. Maria found herself remembering moments when Carmen's behavior had seemed strange or inconsistent, times when her mother had seemed overly invested in David's well-being or had made comments that didn't quite make sense. There had been the time when David was 5 and had asked why he looked so much like his grandpa, Roberto, in old photos, when most children look more like their mothers. Carmen had quickly changed the subject and later told Maria to be more careful about what pictures she left lying around. There had been David's medical appointments, where Carmen had always insisted on coming along and had seemed unusually knowledgeable about his health history and genetic predispositions. At the time, Maria had assumed her mother was just being helpful and thorough, but now she realized that Carmen had been protecting information that only a biological parent would know. There had been the awkward conversations with other mothers at David's school events, where Maria often felt out of place among women who were 10 or 15 years older than her. Other parents had sometimes made comments about how young she looked to have a child David's age, and Carmen had always been quick to jump in with explanations about how Maria was mature for her age and had always been responsible. "She thought of everything," Maria said with a mixture of admiration and disgust. "Every detail, every potential problem, every question someone might ask. She had answers prepared for all of it." David nodded grimly. "Which means this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. She planned this whole thing out before I was even born. She was probably thinking about how to deceive us while she was pregnant with me." The realization that Carmen had been planning this deception for months before David's birth made the betrayal feel even more calculated and cruel. This wasn't a desperate woman making a panicked decision in a moment of crisis. This was someone who had methodically constructed an elaborate lie and had been prepared to maintain it for the rest of her life. As the evening wore on, Maria and David found themselves cycling through different emotions: anger at Carmen for her deception, grief for the relationship they had lost, confusion about their identities, and uncertainty about their future. But underneath all of those complicated feelings, there remained the deep affection and connection that had sustained them for 18 years. "I know this changes everything," Maria said as they prepared to go to bed that night. "But I want you to know that you'll always be one of the most important people in my life. Whether you're my son or my brother, whether we live together or separately, whether we figure out how to navigate this or whether we struggle with it for years, you matter to me. And that's not going to change." David hugged her tightly, and for a moment it felt just like it always had, like a mother and son embracing after a difficult day. But now there was an added layer of complexity to their physical affection, a awareness that their relationship was different from what they had believed. "I love you too," David said quietly. "I don't know what to call you anymore. I don't know how to think about us, but I love you, and I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, even if you did it under false pretenses." The next few days were a blur of difficult conversations and practical considerations. Maria took time off work to help David process the revelation and to begin the complex task of figuring out how to move forward. They made lists of people who would need to know the truth, documents that would need to be updated, and questions they still needed answered. Maria called David's school counselor and arranged a meeting to discuss the situation and its potential impact on his college plans. The counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been working with David for 4 years and had developed a good relationship with both him and Maria. She listened to their story with professionalism and compassion, assuring them that they weren't the first family to deal with complex identity issues and that there were resources available to help them navigate the practical aspects of their situation. The most important thing right now is David's emotional well-being and his ability to finish high school successfully, Mrs. Rodriguez explained. From a legal standpoint, Maria has been his guardian for 18 years, so there shouldn't be any immediate issues with college applications or financial aid. We can work with admissions offices to update any necessary information without causing problems for his enrollment. David was relieved to hear that his college plans wouldn't be derailed by the revelation, but Maria could see that he was still struggling with deeper questions about his identity and his place in the world. The young man who had always been confident and outgoing was becoming withdrawn and uncertain, spending long hours in his room and declining invitations to hang out with friends. Maria decided that they needed professional help to work through the emotional aspects of their situation, so she found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and identity issues. Dr. Sarah Williams had been practicing for over 20 years and had experience with adoption revelations, family secrets, and complex family dynamics. What you're both experiencing is completely normal given the circumstances, Dr. Williams assured them during their first session together. Discovery of major family secrets, especially those involving identity and parentage, can be incredibly disorienting and traumatic. It's going to take time for both of you to process this information and figure out how to integrate it into your understanding of yourselves and your relationship. Over the following weeks, Maria and David attended both individual and joint therapy sessions, working through their anger, grief, and confusion with professional guidance. Dr. Williams helped them understand that their feelings of betrayal and identity confusion were valid, while also encouraging them to focus on the genuine love and connection that had always existed between them. One of the most challenging aspects of your situation, Dr. Williams explained, is that you're grieving not just for the deception, but for the roles you've lost. Maria, you're mourning the loss of your identity as David's mother, a role that gave your life meaning and purpose for 18 years. David, you're mourning the loss of your understanding of yourself as Maria's son and Carmen's grandson. You're both having to rebuild your sense of self from scratch. The therapy helped, but the process of adjusting to their new reality was still incredibly difficult. There were moments when David would start to call Maria Mom and then catch himself, leading to awkward pauses and painful reminders of how much had changed. There were times when Maria would instinctively take on a parental role, reminding David about homework or curfew, and then realize that she no longer had the authority or the right to make those demands. They had to have difficult conversations with extended family members and friends, explaining the situation and dealing with a range of reactions from shock and sympathy to disbelief and judgment. Some people were supportive and understanding, while others seemed to blame Maria for not somehow knowing the truth or questioned whether they were handling the revelation appropriately. David's friends at school were particularly challenging to deal with. Some of them thought the whole situation was fascinating and dramatic, treating it like entertainment rather than recognizing the genuine pain it was causing. Others were uncomfortable with the complexity of it all and began to distance themselves from David, unsure how to relate to him now that his family structure had been revealed to be so unconventional. "It's like I'm a completely different person to them now," David complained to Maria one evening after a particularly difficult day at school. "They can't seem to understand that I'm still the same guy I was before. I just have different information about my family, Maria could relate to that feeling of being judged and misunderstood by people who couldn't grasp the complexity of their situation. At work, her colleagues had been sympathetic about Carmen's death, but seemed bewildered by the family revelation that followed. Some of them made thoughtless comments about how weird or messed up the situation was, not realizing how hurtful their casual observations could be. As winter turned to spring and David's high school graduation approached, Maria began to worry about what would happen to their relationship once he left for college. They had developed a new dynamic as siblings rather than as mother and son, but it was still fragile and uncertain. Maria feared that the physical distance of college combined with the emotional distance created by their changed relationship might cause them to drift apart entirely. "I've been thinking about taking a gap year," David announced one day as they were having dinner together. "Maybe working for a year and taking some time to figure out who I am before I jump into college." Maria felt a surge of panic at the suggestion, though she tried to keep her response measured and supportive. "That's certainly an option, but I don't want you to put your education on hold because of everything that's happened. You've worked so hard to get into college, and you have such bright prospects." "But how can I go off to college and pretend to be this person that I'm not sure I am anymore?" David asked. "I don't even know how to fill out forms that ask about my family. Do I put you down as my sister or as my guardian? Do I list Carmen as my mother, even though she's dead? What do I say when people ask about my background?" These were practical questions that they still hadn't fully resolved, and Maria realized that David's hesitation about college was understandable, given how uncertain their situation remained. They had made progress in therapy and had developed better communication about their feelings, but there were still so many unknowns about how to navigate the world with their new understanding of their relationship. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Williams about this," Maria suggested. "She might have ideas about how to handle the practical aspects of college while you're still working through the emotional aspects of everything that's happened." Dr. Williams encouraged David to proceed with his college plans, arguing that maintaining some normalcy and moving forward with his life goals would be healthier than putting everything on hold while he processed the family revelation. She helped them develop strategies for handling questions about their relationship and paperwork that required family information. "David, you're still the same intelligent, capable, ambitious young man you were before you found out the truth about your parentage," Dr. Williams reminded him. "This revelation doesn't change your abilities, your interests, your personality, or your potential for success. It just gives you additional information about your family history." With encouragement from Dr. Williams and support from Maria, David decided to proceed with his college plans. He would be attending the local community college for his first 2 years, which meant he could continue living at home while he adjusted to their new family dynamic. It wasn't the dramatic, fresh start that some students experience when they go away to college, but it felt like the right choice for their particular circumstances. The weeks leading up to graduation were emotional for both Maria and David as they navigated the milestone with their changed relationship. Maria found herself struggling with her role at graduation events. Was she there as David's sister or as his former guardian? How should she introduce herself to other parents and family members? David was dealing with similar identity questions as he prepared for graduation speeches, yearbook signings, and other traditional senior activities. When classmates talked about their families and their parents' pride in their achievements, David felt confused about how to characterize his own family situation. But despite all the complications and uncertainties, graduation day itself was a celebration of David's achievements and a recognition of how far they had both come in processing their family revelation. As Maria watched David walk across the stage to receive his diploma, she felt the same surge of pride and love that she had always felt at his milestones, regardless of whether that pride came from a mother or a sister. After the ceremony, as they posed for pictures and celebrated with friends and extended family, Maria realized that their relationship had evolved into something that didn't fit neatly into traditional categories. They were siblings by blood, but they had the deep bond and shared history of a parent and child. They were family in the truest sense of the word, even if the specific nature of their relationship was more complex than most people would understand. Over the summer before David started college, they continued to work on rebuilding their relationship and establishing new boundaries and expectations. They had to figure out practical issues like household responsibilities, financial arrangements, and decision-making authority. Maria was no longer David's legal guardian, but she was still the person he turned to for advice and support. They also began to explore their family history more thoroughly, trying to piece together information about their father Roberto and understand more about Carmen's motivations for the deception she had maintained for so long. Maria contacted some of Carmen's older relatives and friends, carefully probing for information about the period around David's birth. Through these conversations, Maria learned that several people had suspected something was unusual about the situation at the time, but no one had felt comfortable questioning Carmen directly. Roberto had indeed left town shortly after David's birth, apparently unable or unwilling to take responsibility for another child at his age. Carmen had been secretive about her pregnancy and had given birth in a hospital in a different town, telling people she was there to care for Maria during a difficult time. It's like she created this elaborate fiction and convinced everyone to play along with it, David observed, as they discussed what they had learned. People must have had questions, but she was so convincing and so determined that they just went along with her story. Maria found herself feeling conflicted about Carmen's memory as she learned more about the extent of her mother's deception. On one hand, she was angry and hurt by the lies that had shaped her entire adult life. On the other hand, she recognized that Carmen had been in an impossible situation, facing single parenthood at 43 with an older daughter who was just starting her own adult life. "I think she genuinely believed she was doing what was best for everyone," Maria told Dr. Williams during one of their sessions. "She thought David would be better off with a young mother figure, and she thought I would step up to help raise him. She probably never imagined that I would sacrifice my entire young adulthood to be his mother." It's possible to understand Carmen's motivations without excusing the harm that her deception caused, Dr. Williams replied. "People often make decisions that seem reasonable to them at the time, but have unintended consequences that affect other people for years or decades." As David prepared to start college in the fall, Maria found herself facing her own questions about identity and purpose. For 18 years, her primary role in life had been as David's mother. Now at 36, she was trying to figure out who she was as an individual and what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. She had been working at the same diner since David was a baby, a job that had provided steady income and flexible hours that allowed her to be available for school events and family obligations. But it had never been a career that challenged her or provided personal fulfillment. It had simply been a means to an end, a way to support David and maintain their household. "Have you ever thought about going back to school yourself?" Dr. Williams asked during one of their sessions. "You mentioned that you had planned to study nursing before David was born. Is that still something that interests you?" The question surprised Maria because she hadn't allowed herself to think about her own unrealized dreams and ambitions for so long. Being David's mother had required such complete focus and dedication that she had pushed aside any thoughts about her own career goals or personal development. "I used to think about it sometimes," Maria admitted, "especially when I was helping David with his homework or when I was dealing with medical issues and realized how much I didn't know. But it always seemed impossible with David to take care of and bills to pay." "What seems impossible now?" Dr. Williams asked gently. The question stayed with Maria for days as she considered the possibility that she might be able to pursue some of the goals she had set aside when she thought she became a teenage mother. David was grown and would be increasingly independent as he progressed through college. She had 18 years of work experience and a strong recommendation from her boss at the diner. She was still young enough to start over and build a career that would be personally meaningful and financially sustainable. When she mentioned the possibility of returning to school to David, he was immediately supportive and encouraging. Maria, you should absolutely do it," he said, catching himself mid-sentence as he navigated the ongoing challenge of what to call her. "You've spent your entire adult life taking care of me. It's time for you to do something for yourself." The conversation about names had become one of the most persistent reminders of how their relationship had changed. David couldn't bring himself to call Maria by her first name after 18 years of calling her Mom, but using that term now felt strange and inaccurate. They had experimented with various alternatives, Sis, Maria, even M, but nothing felt completely natural or comfortable. "You know what?" David said one evening as they were discussing the ongoing awkwardness of their naming situation. "I think I'm okay with still calling you Mom sometimes. Not because I think you're my biological mother, but because you've been the person who mothered me for my entire life. The role you played in raising me was real, even if the biological relationship wasn't what we thought." Maria felt tears spring to her eyes at David's words. She had been worried that insisting on biological accuracy would somehow diminish or invalidate the genuine parenting she had provided for 18 years. But David's suggestion offered a way to honor both the truth of their blood relationship and the reality of the roles they had played in each other's lives. "I would like that," she said softly, "because even though you're my brother, I did raise you. I was your mother in every way that mattered, even if I didn't give birth to you." This decision helped them both feel more comfortable with their relationship as they moved forward. David could call Maria Mom when the situation warranted it, or when it felt natural, while also acknowledging that she was technically his sister. Maria could embrace her maternal role in David's life, while also exploring her own identity as a woman who had been given a second chance at pursuing her dreams. As autumn arrived and David started college, Maria began researching nursing programs and requirements for returning students. She discovered that her 18 years of work experience, combined with her strong high school grades, would make her a competitive applicant for several local programs. She also learned about financial aid options for older students and found that her changed family status might actually make her eligible for more assistance than she would have received as David's guardian. David thrived during his first semester of college, embracing both his studies and the social aspects of college life with enthusiasm that reassured Maria that he was successfully moving forward despite the family revelation. He made new friends who knew him only as David Santos, a first-generation college student with a supportive older sister, without the complicated backstory of deception and identity confusion. "It's actually kind of liberating," David told Maria during one of their regular dinner dates. "With my new friends, I can just be myself without having to explain or justify our family situation. They accept that you're my sister who helped raise me, and they don't need to know all the details about why or how that happened." Maria was pursuing her own new experiences as well, taking prerequisite courses at the community college and reconnecting with parts of herself that had been dormant for years. She discovered that she had a natural aptitude for science courses and found genuine excitement in learning about anatomy, physiology, and medical procedures. Her classmates in the nursing program were a diverse group of people from different backgrounds and life stages, many of whom were returning to school after raising children or changing careers. Maria found that her experience as a young single parent had given her maturity and time management skills that served her well in the demanding nursing curriculum. "I never thought I would say this," Maria confided to Dr. Williams during one of their sessions, "but I'm actually grateful that I found out the truth about David. Not grateful for all the pain and confusion it caused, but grateful that it forced me to reevaluate my life and consider possibilities I had never allowed myself to explore." Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. "It's remarkable how you've both been able to transform this traumatic revelation into an opportunity for growth and positive change. That takes tremendous resilience and emotional maturity." The therapy sessions had been instrumental in helping Maria and David process their complex emotions and develop healthy ways of relating to each other in their new roles. They had learned to communicate more openly about their feelings, to set appropriate boundaries, and to support each other through the ongoing challenges of their unusual situation. As David's first year of college progressed, he began to talk about his future plans with more confidence and clarity than he had shown in the months immediately following the family revelation. He was majoring in business administration with the goal of eventually starting his own company, and he talked excitedly about internship opportunities and career possibilities. "I think I want to specialize in family business consulting," he told Maria one day. "After everything we've been through, I feel like I have a unique perspective on how family dynamics can affect business relationships and decision-making." Maria was impressed by David's ability to find meaning and purpose in their difficult experience, and she supported his academic and career goals with the same dedication she had always shown. But now, their relationship felt more balanced and mutual, with both of them pursuing their own dreams while continuing to support each other. During Maria's second semester in the nursing program, she was assigned to do clinical rotations at the local hospital. One of her rotations was in the maternity ward, where she cared for new mothers and their babies. The experience was both rewarding and emotionally challenging, as it forced her to confront her own complicated feelings about motherhood and the unique way she had become a parent. "It's strange," Maria told David after a particularly intense day in the maternity ward, "watching these women with their newborns and remembering when you were that small. I loved you so completely from the moment Carmen put you in my arms. But now I understand that what I was feeling was a combination of sisterly protectiveness and maternal instinct that developed because of the circumstances." David had grown comfortable discussing these deeper emotional aspects of their relationship, and he offered thoughtful perspectives on Maria's experiences. "I think the love you felt was completely genuine, regardless of what caused it," he said. "You didn't know I was your brother, but you knew I was someone who needed you, and you responded with everything you had to give." Their conversations had become more philosophical and introspective as they both matured and gained perspective on their experiences. They talked about the nature of family, the difference between biological relationships and chosen relationships, and the ways that love can transcend traditional categories and definitions. Maria's nursing instructors and clinical supervisors began to recognize her exceptional skills and dedication, and she was encouraged to consider specializing in pediatric nursing or family health. Her personal experience with complex family situations and her natural empathy for people facing difficult circumstances made her particularly effective in clinical settings. As David's sophomore year approached, he made the decision to transfer to a 4-year university to complete his bachelor's degree. The school he chose was about 2 hours away, which meant he would be living on campus and coming home less frequently. Maria supported his decision wholeheartedly, but she also felt nervous about the increased distance and independence. "I'm proud of how independent and confident you've become," Maria told David as they prepared for his transfer. "But I'm also going to miss having you around so much." For 18 years, Taking care of you was my primary focus, and it's still an adjustment to think about you being so far away and living your own life." David hugged her tightly. "I'm going to miss you too, but I think this is healthy for both of us. You need space to focus on your nursing career and figure out what you want your life to look like now that you're not actively parenting me. And I need to learn how to be fully independent and make my own decisions without always turning to you for guidance." The summer before David's transfer was filled with preparation and anticipation. They spent time together visiting the campus, shopping for dorm room supplies, and having long conversations about expectations and boundaries for their relationship going forward. They established plans for regular phone calls and visits, while also acknowledging that their communication patterns would naturally evolve as David became more involved in campus life. Maria used the summer to intensify her focus on nursing school, taking additional prerequisite courses and volunteering at a local clinic to gain more hands-on experience. She found that she particularly enjoyed working with pediatric patients and their families, drawing on her own experiences to provide emotional support and practical guidance to parents facing medical challenges with their children. One day at the clinic, Maria was working with a teenage mother who had brought her infant son in for a routine checkup. The young woman was clearly overwhelmed and exhausted, struggling to balance the demands of new parenthood with her own educational and career goals. As Maria provided guidance about infant care and resources for young parents, she was struck by the parallels to her own experience 18 years earlier. "You're doing a great job," Maria assured the young mother as they concluded the appointment. "Being a parent is incredibly challenging at any age, but you have such obvious love for your son, and that's the most important thing. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it, and don't feel guilty about taking care of yourself too." The young woman's grateful response reminded Maria of the unique perspective and valuable skills she had developed through her own unconventional path to motherhood. Even though she had discovered that her parenting experience was built on deception, the knowledge and empathy she had gained were real and could be used to help other families facing challenges. As David prepared to leave for his transfer university in late August, Maria felt a complex mixture of emotions that reflected the complexity of their relationship. She was proud of his academic achievements and excited about his future prospects, but she was also experiencing a version of empty nest syndrome, complicated by the ongoing questions about their family roles. "I keep thinking about how different this would feel if I were sending my son off to college versus watching my brother move on to the next stage of his life," Maria confided to Dr. Williams during one of their final sessions before David's departure. "Both emotions are valid, but they're different, and I'm not sure which one is more appropriate or honest." Dr. Williams encouraged Maria to embrace the complexity of her feelings rather than trying to categorize them neatly. "Your relationship with David transcends traditional family categories," she explained. "You've been his primary caregiver, his biggest advocate, his role model, and his emotional support system. Those roles don't disappear just because you've learned that you're siblings instead of mother and son." The weekend of David's departure was emotional for both of them, but it was also filled with excitement and optimism about the future. As they loaded his belongings into Maria's car and prepared for the drive to campus, they reflected on how much their lives had changed since that devastating day in Carmen's attic nearly 2 years earlier. "I never thought I would say this," David said, as they drove toward his new university, "but I think finding out the truth about our relationship was ultimately a good thing. It was incredibly painful and confusing at the time, but it forced both of us to really examine our lives and make intentional choices about our futures." Maria agreed, though she acknowledged that the process of adjustment and healing was ongoing. "I think we're both stronger and more honest people now than we were before," We've learned how to communicate better, how to support each other through difficult times, and how to maintain our connection even when our roles and circumstances change. Helping David move into his dorm room and meet his roommate was bittersweet for Maria. She felt proud of the confident, articulate young man he had become, but she also felt acutely aware that a major chapter of their lives together was ending. As she hugged him goodbye and prepared for the drive home alone, she realized that she was both mourning the loss of her daily role in his life and celebrating his successful transition to independence. The drive home gave Maria time to reflect on the journey they had shared and the unexpected ways that trauma and crisis had ultimately led to growth and positive change. She thought about Carmen and the complex legacy of love and deception that had shaped their family. She thought about the 18 years she had devoted to raising David and how those experiences had prepared her for her new career in nursing. She thought about the future and the possibilities that lay ahead for both of them. Back home in the quiet house, Maria felt the full impact of David's absence for the first time. For 18 years, her daily routine had been structured around his needs and schedules. Now, she had to learn how to live primarily for herself while maintaining their important but evolved relationship from a distance. She threw herself into her nursing studies with renewed focus and determination, excelling in her clinical rotations and developing a reputation among her instructors as a student with exceptional empathy and practical skills. Her experience as a young parent had given her insights into family dynamics and patient care that her younger classmates lacked, and she found herself becoming a mentor figure for other students who were struggling with the demands of the program. David flourished at his new university, embracing both his academic studies and the social opportunities of campus life. He joined the business club, participated in intramural sports, and developed new friendships with classmates who shared his interests and ambitions. His regular phone calls home were filled with enthusiasm about his courses, his professors, and his plans for internships and career development. "I feel like I'm finally becoming the person I was meant to be," David told Maria during one of their weekly conversations. Not the person who was shaped by family secrets and complicated dynamics, but the person who's making his own choices and creating his own identity. Maria was delighted to hear the confidence and joy in David's voice, and she shared his excitement about her own progress in nursing school. She had decided to specialize in pediatric nursing, drawn by her natural connection with children and families facing medical challenges. Her clinical supervisors had begun discussing opportunities for her to continue working at the hospital after graduation, potentially in the children's ward or the family health clinic. As the academic year progressed, both Maria and David found their stride in their new roles and environments. They maintained regular communication and continued to provide emotional support for each other, but their relationship had evolved into something more balanced and mutual than the caregiver-dependent dynamic that had characterized their previous 18 years together. During David's winter break visit home, they spent long hours talking about their experiences and reflecting on the growth they had both achieved. The house felt different now, still warm and welcoming, but no longer centered around the daily routines of active parenting. "I've been thinking about Carmen a lot lately," David said one evening as they sat by the fireplace, sharing memories and processing their ongoing emotional journey. "I'm still angry about the deception, but I'm also starting to understand that she was a complicated person dealing with an impossible situation." Maria nodded, appreciating David's growing maturity and emotional intelligence. "I think Carmen genuinely believed she was protecting both of us by creating that story about your parentage. She probably never anticipated how completely I would embrace the role of being your mother, or how much of my own life I would sacrifice for that role." They had developed a more nuanced understanding of Carmen's motivations and actions, recognizing that she had been simultaneously selfish and selfless, manipulative and protective. The black and white anger they had initially felt toward her had evolved into a more complex acknowledgement of her human frailties and the impossible choices she had faced. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked quietly. "All those years you spent raising me instead of pursuing your own dreams and relationships?" Maria considered the question carefully before answering. "I regret that it was based on deception, and I regret that Carmen didn't give me the choice to understand what I was really doing. But I don't regret the love I gave you or the person you've become. And I don't regret the skills and perspectives I developed during those years, even if they came at a personal cost I didn't fully understand at the time." Their conversation continued late into the night, touching on topics they had never been able to discuss when their relationship was defined by traditional parent-child roles. They talked about romantic relationships, career ambitions, future family plans, and their hopes for maintaining their close connection as they both continued to grow and change. When David returned to university after winter break, Maria felt more confident about their relationship and more excited about her own future than she had in years. She was in the final semester of her nursing program, preparing for her licensing exam and interviewing for potential positions at local hospitals and clinics. The pediatric nursing supervisor at the hospital where Maria had done her clinical rotations offered her a position in the children's ward, praising her natural rapport with young patients and her exceptional ability to communicate with worried parents. Maria accepted the position eagerly, knowing that her personal experience with complex family situations would be an asset in her professional work. As graduation approached for both Maria's nursing program and David's sophomore year, they planned a joint celebration that acknowledged their individual achievements while honoring the unique journey they had shared. Extended family members and friends who had supported them through the revelation and adjustment period were invited to participate in recognizing how far they had both come. The celebration was held at their home, the same house where they had lived together for 18 years and where they had discovered the truth about their relationship in Carmen's attic. But now the house felt different, not haunted by secrets and deception, but filled with the promise of honest communication and authentic relationships. During the celebration, Maria and David both spoke about their experiences and the lessons they had learned through their journey of discovery and adjustment. They thanked the friends, family members, and professionals who had supported them through their most difficult period, and they expressed gratitude for the unexpected gifts that had emerged from their traumatic revelation. "We learned that family isn't just about biology or traditional roles," Maria said to the gathered group. "It's about love, commitment, support, and showing up for each other through both good times and incredibly challenging times. David and I may not have the relationship we thought we had, but we have the relationship we chose to build together based on honesty and mutual respect." David added, "This experience taught us that identity is more complex than we realized, and that it's possible to honor the past while creating new definitions for the future. Maria will always be the person who raised me and shaped who I became, regardless of what we call that relationship or how other people categorize it." The celebration marked a significant milestone in their journey, representing not just their individual academic and professional achievements, but their successful navigation of one of the most challenging family situations imaginable. They had taken a devastating revelation that could have destroyed their relationship and transformed it into an opportunity for growth, honesty, and deeper connection. As summer arrived and Maria began her career as a pediatric nurse, she found deep satisfaction in using her professional skills and personal experience to help other families navigate medical challenges and complex circumstances. Her colleagues quickly recognized her exceptional ability to provide both clinical care and emotional support, particularly for families dealing with chronic illnesses or traumatic situations. David spent the summer working as an intern at a local business consulting firm, gaining practical experience in his field while continuing to live at home and maintain his close relationship with Maria. The summer allowed them to enjoy each other's company without the intensity and upheaval that had characterized their relationship during the period immediately following their family revelation. They had reached a comfortable equilibrium in their relationship, maintaining the deep affection and mutual support that had always characterized their bond while respecting the boundaries and independence appropriate to their status as adult siblings. Maria continued to offer guidance and encouragement when David sought her advice, but she no longer felt responsible for managing his daily decisions or solving his problems. As David prepared to return to university for his junior year, both he and Maria reflected on how much their lives had changed and improved since that shocking day in Carmen's attic. The revelation that had initially seemed like a devastating crisis had ultimately become the catalyst for positive changes that neither of them could have imagined. "I think Carmen would be proud of how we've handled this," David said, as they shared a quiet dinner during his last week at home before returning to school. "She made some terrible choices in how she handled the situation, but I think she really did love both of us and want what was best for our family." Maria agreed, having reached a place of peace with Carmen's memory that balanced acknowledgement of the harm caused by her deception with recognition of the love and good intentions that had motivated many of her actions. "I think she would be amazed to see how we've grown and how strong our relationship has become. She probably never imagined that the truth could ultimately bring us closer together rather than driving us apart." Their conversation was interrupted by David's phone, buzzing with messages from university friends who were excited about his return to campus and eager to hear about his summer experiences. As Maria watched David respond to his friends with enthusiasm and confidence, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction in the young man he had become and the independent life he was building. That evening, as Maria prepared for another year of David living away from home, she reflected on the remarkable journey they had shared and the unexpected ways that trauma and crisis can lead to growth and positive change. She thought about the 18-year-old girl she had been when she first held David in her arms, believing she was holding her son and accepting the enormous responsibility of parenthood without question or hesitation. She thought about the woman she was now, 38 years old, professionally accomplished, emotionally mature, and finally living a life based on truth rather than deception. She thought about David, no longer the confused and identity-shaken 18-year-old who had learned that his entire understanding of his family was built on lies, but a confident young man who was creating his own path and his own identity while maintaining the loving relationships that had always sustained him. The story of their family would never be conventional or easily explained to others, but it had become a story of resilience, love, and the power of truth to transform even the most challenging circumstances into opportunities for growth and deeper connection. They had learned that family is ultimately about choice and commitment, rather than biology alone, and that authentic relationships can survive and even thrive in the aftermath of devastating revelations. As Maria turned off the lights and prepared for bed in the quiet house, she felt profound gratitude for the journey they had shared and excitement about the future that lay ahead for both of them. They had survived the destruction of their assumed identities and had rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and chosen love that was stronger than any bond based solely on obligation or assumed roles. The last thing Maria thought before falling asleep was how proud she was of both David and herself for having the courage to face the truth about their family and the wisdom to transform that truth into something beautiful and lasting. They had proven that love is ultimately stronger than deception, that growth is possible even in the aftermath of profound trauma, and that families can be redefined and rebuilt when the people involved are committed to honesty, forgiveness, and each other's well-being. In the months and years that followed, Maria and David continued to thrive in their respective pursuits while maintaining the close, supportive relationship they had rebuilt on a foundation of truth and choice rather than obligation and deception. Their story became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love that transcends traditional categories and definitions. Maria's career in pediatric nursing flourished as she combined her professional skills with her personal experience to help other families navigate complex medical and emotional challenges. She became known among her colleagues as someone with exceptional empathy and practical wisdom, able to provide both clinical care and emotional support to families facing their most difficult moments. David completed his business degree with honors and went on to build a successful consulting practice that specialized in helping family businesses navigate complex dynamics and challenging transitions. His personal experience with family secrets and identity issues gave him unique insights into the ways that unresolved emotional issues can impact business relationships and decision-making processes. Their relationship evolved and deepened over the years, maintaining the core elements of love, support, and commitment that had always characterized their bond, while allowing for the growth, independence, and individual identity development that healthy adult relationships require. They had learned that family is ultimately about the choices we make to show up for each other through both joyful and challenging times, regardless of the specific biological or legal relationships that may exist. The revelation that had once seemed like the most devastating crisis imaginable had become the foundation for a stronger, more honest, and more fulfilling life for both of them. They had discovered that truth, however painful it may initially be, ultimately provides a more solid foundation for relationships and personal growth than any deception, however well-intentioned. Their story served as a reminder that families come in many different forms, that love can transcend traditional categories and definitions, and that the most profound growth often emerges from the most challenging circumstances. They had transformed a legacy of deception into a testament to the power of honesty, forgiveness, and the kind of love that chooses to persist and flourish even in the face of the most unexpected revelations. In the end, Maria and David's journey proved that while we cannot always control the circumstances we inherit or the secrets that may be revealed to us, we can choose how we respond to those circumstances and what kind of relationships we build in their aftermath. They had chosen love, truth, and commitment to each other's well-being, and that choice had transformed their lives in ways that neither of them could have imagined when they first discovered those devastating documents in Carmen's attic years earlier. If you made it this far and haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't waste any time. Subscribe, turn on notifications, leave a like, and tell me in the comments. What did you think of this story? Thank you for watching, and see you next time.